Hello there, my name is Tenarium and welcome to episode 12 of Tenarium and Tryinmorning Talk Viennes. With me here, I have my lovely darling guest.
Hello, everyone. This is Tryinmorning.
Not guest, of course, he is the co-host.
Yes,
And
well, I'm used to this treatment by now.
yeah, well, sorry, man, sorry. This is my channel now. You're a second-class citizen. That's how this works. I'm top dog around here. And, hello to everyone. How are you, Patrick? Are you well?
I'm doing quite fine on this Sunday. This podcast, for those who are tuning in or checking us out on YouTube, is, I don't know, the first we've done in a month or so. It's been quite delayed, either way.
Yeah, it has been quite delayed. But we are getting back to a normal schedule as of now. So,
kind of.
Kind of. The next one will either be in 2 or 3 weeks. We haven't decided yet, but that'll be plugging ourselves already. That will be an award show of this year, and we have done extensive planning in a Google Doc. And by that, I mean we were just dicking around for a while.
Yes, we've
got
come up
like
with some quite creative ideas, which we don't want to give away at this time.
Yeah, I quite like some of the ideas. We got the good stuff out of the way, and now it's just sort of like meandering into the sort of like the silly version of the awards. So that'll hopefully be great. So yeah, we're getting back to a normal session. What have you been up to since our last podcast? Remember, this is the bit where we evenly endear ourselves.
Oh, I've been up to a whole lot, playing visual novels. Well, just this last week we had Thanksgiving here in the US. So, that was a fun event to get together with family and that kind of thing.
That is true. Thanksgiving did indeed pass. I was actually on someone else's podcast, the Gatcast podcast, and they did an interview with me. I'm not going to say that I wasn't first on their list, but Scott did tell me that the only reason I was on it is because I was the only one who'd be available around Thanksgiving.
Well, the highest of compliments.
Yes, the highest of all the compliments, seeing as I don't really care about Thanksgiving in the slightest. So, what with being a European. So, that was kind of a thing. Other than that, yeah, I think we've both been well, haven't we?
Mm-hmm.
Right,
Both
now, should we get onto the drama/news section?
Yes, sure thing.
Jesus, it's... Where it's been 3.5 weeks, well, 3 weeks, a month, something like that. Like, it's been a while. And when that's happened, there's been a lot of AJ Tilly news. A silly amount of AJ Tilly. And I say news, it's all drama. I mean, it's just all terrible. Like, he contributes to, I think, all English visual novel drama because everyone else is keeping quiet because he's just a bit silly and constantly keeps saying silly things all the time.
Essentially, he's a good example of what to avoid, right?
He's a great example of what to avoid. But, right, let's go through this. So he had a Kickstarter called High School Possession, which he quit with a status only to patrons, to backers, which says, I just can't take it anymore. None of us know what happened. Then he released a new game called Divine Slice of Life. He had friends posting positive reviews for him. The one negative review he was there is him getting angry at one guy who gave him a negative review. Right, that was like his only thing. But there were reviews which appeared very, very quickly on Steam, and he was friends with those people. It's on Steam. It's like, for fuck's sake, is it that hard to just not be a douche? But apparently it was. Then a couple of weeks ago, they then changing their name, but they're not changing their name. It's now a dedicated development studio, which will increase the quality of their games. That's called Darker Studios.
Right.
Now, I've played High School Romance, which is, I think, their game. The quality hasn't magically shot it up, believe it or not. It's still exactly the same.
Are you telling me that not just changing your name is enough? We have to actually do more than just change your name and think that everything's going to be better all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, apparently that's not how that works.
Huh.
So, surprising. Then JP over at vnsnow.com sent him over a bunch of questions, and they were all PR-like answers. And it's hard to define what PR-like answers is, but I think everyone roughly knows what PR-like answers are. It's a lot of saying a lot whilst also saying nothing. And, you know, why are all your games so shit? Well, we look to siphon some of the stress off by putting it down to people in darker studios and then the other day we're on Skype and Darker have 2 fucking patrons. It's just like, Darker Studios are not going to be used Kickstarter to fund games. No, they're just using Patreon. It's like, oh my god, you're still doing it. You're still being dicks. Like, they have one for the only art, and then they have a separate patron to fund a game. It's like, that's just, you may as well use Kickstarter. It's just you can say, no, we're not doing that anymore. It's, grumble.
I think that we've seen in the last year that Patreon is a good way to kind of raise funds for visual novels or basically any kind of project without really having to promise too much. Because you just have to give some kind of perks every month. You don't have to actually commit to making a game or anything like that.
Yeah, so you can just do even less. It's ridiculous. And, he's just...
You can see how high their standards are at Patreon as well with the whole marble syrup incident that happened, 6 months ago?
Yeah, sort of nothing was done about that. And AJT.com is like plastered over a lot of Darker's Patreon as well. It's like, hang on a minute. But it's all just a bit silly, if you know what I mean. I mean, luckily, I don't think his more recent game has done too well, has it? High School Romance? I don't think it sold much. Which, I'm still trying to decide whether a good thing or not. Hang on. If I go onto Steam Spy and look it up. So, it has 2,000 owners, give or take 1,000. Oh, no, oh Christ, it has 3.7 thousand owners, give or take 1,500. Oh, that makes me sad, because that's a lot. That, in his eyes, is a commercial success. A word I can't stand, because it doesn't mean it's any good. It just means that it made money. Which also means that he's not actually going to try and make good visual novels off the back of it. It's just still going to try and be, oh, well, you know, this worked last time, so we'll try and do that again, lol, see if it works. And it never fucking does.
Are you implying that this High School Romance wasn't very good?
Oh, it was awful. It was really bad.
Really?
Yeah. Look, the thing is some of his games have been so bad before that you now look back and go, oh, well, actually, this wasn't as shit. That's not good. That still means it's terrible. It's just the standard set after Beach Bounce was so shockingly bad that in order to get worse than that, I think it would have just had, I think even a blank game would have been better than Beach Bounce. Like one which just didn't work. One which didn't have a .exe file when you hit play. You know, it's... he makes me grumble. He really does. But that's the AJ Tilly section over. Now, so we got him over with. We won't mention him anymore. Probably. Maybe. Can't promise that. And then news from, like, I think this is 3 weeks old now, the Tyranno Builder Jam. That came out. Bluebird Plays won it with a Flamingo Tale. A game which, to a certain extent, didn't quite feel complete. And I sort of wondered how it won. But, I mean, it was definitely good. There were 5 judges for that, as we know. Tom from Moacube was in it, and he picked one of the games that we've picked out to play, Zugunruhe, as his favourite. That didn't even make top 4. I don't know how a judge can say that. Yes, this was my favourite one, and then it's not in the overall top 4, unless they all had different options, something which I doubt. So that was the thing that went on. Apparently there are going to be more jams in the future, and hopefully Tyranno Builder will improve and keep improving, because I've tinkered around with Tyranno Builder, and it is still, unfortunately, I don't see why you'd use it over Ren'Py.
Yeah, I mean, the only experience I've had so far is just playing the one game that we had for this podcast, the Zugunruhe, or however the hell you pronounce that. And the game didn't have a save function at all, which is rather odd. Didn't have a menu at all, even. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a bit if you know what I mean. The Tyrannum builder. I hope it gets a lot better, but Renpai is still a lot better. Like,
mhm.
it's been around for God knows how many years, and it's free as well. So, uh, but you never know. Tyrannum builder might get amazing, and then we'll all look silly for even saying it.
Well, it's always good
Who
to have
knows?
options, so hopefully one day.
It's always good to have options. Moving on to games. Games we've played. Oh boy, we're going to start with a good one here. We don't normally do this on my channel. On my channel, it's normally the ones reserved for the bad ones. This week, however, we start with Cupid from Fervent Studios. So, God, where do I even start with this? I played it through on my channel. I started a while ago. I was like, fuck it. I'll just start playing it through. And I mean, spoiler alert for where I'm going with this. But if this doesn't end up being my best visual novel this year, I'll be shocked. I really liked it. It was awesome. So you play as this girl who starts off in a church, and then a priest takes her in and goes, hey, you don't need to do anything like that. And your mother is in your head. You essentially play as the mother and sort of flit around to other people's perspectives as well. But you can't actually decide what they're doing. You can only see what they're thinking. But with yourself, you can choose what Rosa, your daughter, is doing. And I think it's safe to assume that mother is only a voice in your head. That's not a spoiler. That's learned pretty early on. So, but you go out the church and you meet this French noble house thingy, and some rude people are there. And there's this girl called Catherine, and she's playing piano, and she's all amazing at playing the piano. And then the French noble's like, hey, I totally want to sponsor you. That would be incredible. Like, I'd love to do that. And then Catherine, the little girl, goes, oh, but what about this girl? Because, you know, we're walking by and people are mocking us. It's just like, hey, she should come and live with us. And then you do. And then the rest of the game sort of goes on from there. I mean, it's quite difficult, if you know what I mean, to speak about it without spoiling anything.
Yeah, you never want to say too much about something like this, which is a game, I think from the bat, we can both say this is a game you should definitely try on your own and experience first.
Yeah, you know what everyone's saying, like, with Undertale? Where they're like, yeah, this game is really, really good, but we can't talk much about it because it would be ruining it. You just have to go and play it for yourself. This game's free, too. It's free.
This was a hell of a deal.
Yeah, I'd pay money for this game. But this game is free. It is really good. It's basically about how you sort of slowly grow up and go through the years, and certain things happen that you don't suspect. And I put it this way: Mother is a voice in your head. That should tell you where this is going, right? They don't all end up at McDonald's at the end.
Yeah,
there's no happy, funny, smiley faces and people linking arms and I don't know, playing all those games that I'm sure all the kids do. There's nothing like that, right? It does sort of go on from that. It's just really good. You need to play it right now and download it and play it and have it be awesome.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I should just give a brief backing story to this. When Chris was mentioning this to me, like the first time around, I guess he kind of wanted to like mess with my head a bit. So he's like, "Oh yeah, this story Cupid, it's terrible. You're not gonna like it at all." I'm like, "Oh really?" I'm like, "I was about to play it today, but." So, you know, he wanted me to go into it with like low expectations, but then I just like didn't play it for a week afterwards. And then later I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just not gonna play the game Cupid since it's so terrible." And he's like, it's actually really good. And you have to try it on your own."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, really?
I asked you a few days ago, so have you played it? And you were like, oh, no, you said it was terrible, so I probably just wasn't going to bother and let you deal with it. I was just like, oh, shit, now I need to tell him it's really good.
So then, yeah, I did play it, and then I did have these expectations in mind, and I was going to at first. I'm like, it'll be all right, probably, but I'm not expecting to be blown away. This really did quickly shoot to the top of list for 2015. I was surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I did, and I mean everything from the theme of the game, which is essentially about love and the different types of love there are, and how love can be healing and how love can also hurt. It's an interesting way of telling a story, because as Chris mentioned, it's separated into chapters, and it kind of jumps back and forth through time of this young woman's life, from when she was a kid growing up to, the present, where she's dealing with some issues on her own, which get very heavy very quickly. And it goes back to revisiting earlier things in her life that has led to where she is now. So it's really interesting. The pacing of the story is really good. I don't think there was a time in the story that I was bored or, clicking to get through. I thought they handled this very well with the pacing. It wasn't too long. I think I played it probably about 3 hours or so. So there's not a lot of ends where I could say the pacing is pretty consistent all the way through. This is one of them. And yeah, I have the highest praises for this one.
Yeah, and when Patrick says that it's all about love, bear with us. It's not as hippie as he made it sound out. Right? It's not. It's, again, very hard to
It's not a romance game.
Without spoiling it. Yeah, there's no flowers in everyone's hair, and
it's about like familial love.
Out of a shotgun.
It's about the love between friends, the love between romantic love. They have the Latin names for it. I forget what they are. There's Eros. I can't remember them offhand, but they mention at some point in the game, and it comes into play with the theme of the game, the 3 different types of love, and then there's the 4th love, which is unrequited love, I think, or unconditional rather. But yeah, I mean, it's not like the hippie kind of love, like Chris said. It's just it can get very dark at times, and we're kind of skirting around it because we don't want to say too much to spoil it.
Yeah. The tone is set very early, and then it carries on in that tone. A problem I see occur more often than not in visual novels is a game not sticking to a tone. Like, it's fine, you can change a tone, you can have light and happy scenes and dark and miserable scenes, but what you can't have is people flitting almost mid-sentence back and forth and back and forth. This just, it gets a tone and just sticks in it all the way through. And there can be sudden changes in mood, but it's just really well done. I mean, play the first 15 minutes if you're not convinced, and convince yourself. Like, you'll soon be hooked. I was expecting not a lot going into this game at all. I only played it on my channel because I saw someone I follow on Twitter say it. And I was like, why not? I'll play it. Why not? What's the worst that could happen? And apparently the worst that could happen was that I found my favorite game of the year.
It's funny how it took us like all the way up until the end of the year. I mean, this game did come out, I think, in September, but it took us until now to play it. It took us like the whole year to find our favorite one, and I just found that so amusing, so appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. I was going through a few good visual novels that had come out this year, and none until this one had hit me as bam, this is it. This is the one that I can start recommending to people who aren't normal visual novel players.
And it's not really a spoiler, but I think this is one of the games where it has an example of one of the most appropriate and well done sex scenes in any VN I've seen.
Yes. The sex scenes aren't really weird. I think it's because, again, I mean, as we've said, it's dark. I mean, the sex scenes aren't written so you're sitting there, 3 legs, as it were, going, whoa, look at this, whoa, yeah, fucking get her, lad, fucking do it. They're not written that way. They're not written in the normal way, which is to say that it's written to turn people on badly, not naming any names Loopysoft. It's not like that. I wouldn't even say it's tastefully done, because it is quite graphic. It's just not written in such a way where it's supposed to evoke you, as it were. It's written to further the story, God forbid.
Yeah, it's something that's an integral part of the story, not just to provide fan service.
Yeah, which is...
it's the exact opposite of that, pretty much.
Yeah. It could not actually be further from the truth. You know, if it being fan service. It's just really good. I mean, you should play it. You should get it. It's called Cupid. It's by Fervent Studios. They made Who Is Mike? Did you know that? Yeah.
Yeah, you did tell me.
Yeah, they made Who Is Mike, which surprised me when I went back and looked. So I was just like, wow, I didn't even like that game too much. But either they wanted to do something different, or they took the feedback they got from Who Is Mike and changed it up a bit, and this beauty came out.
Yeah, either way, whatever they did after that, I mean, this is just spectacular. I mean, there were some things about, like, I'm trying to remember Who Is Mike. I think the biggest problem I had with that was that it was a bit inconsistent with, like, the choices, or something like that. Like, depending on what you chose, something different happened. I don't remember.
Yeah, and I'd also sort of say with Who Is Mike, a problem was, again, tone. That was one of my biggest problems, that for those that don't remember, you wake up in a room and then you're also there. So basically you're stuck with yourself and you don't know how, but it goes from very serious to just joking about, to very serious to joking about. Randomly. Like, there's also that bit where the guy goes, oh yeah, oh no, your girlfriend. She goes,
oh, right, okay, I remember now.
Yeah, I don't want to make this a 20 questions thing. And then it's a 20 questions
That's exactly
thing.
what it becomes.
And, yeah, like 4 or 5 of the endings end like that. It's like, but what? I thought we weren't doing that. Like, I thought that's what we decided we weren't going to do. But this time they sort of went with that approach, and they just didn't really make it funny. They stuck with the tone they set in the beginning, and it's just so good. I can't talk about it enough. It's just good. Damn you should play it. It's good. It's good.
I think there's one final thing I have to say about this game, and I mentioned to you before we started the podcast. There's one little interesting bit, because after you played all the endings to this, you get some bonus content, and one of them includes production notes. So, remember we were looking at the writers for this game, and one of them included someone named Tiny Tim 12?
Yes.
And you thought, oh, that's a funny name. It sounded familiar to me. And in the production notes, they mentioned this. Tiny Tim 12 was the person who wrote a game called I Think My Head is Darkness.
Oh my god, really?
And the whole concept behind the mother character is taken from that game.
Well, I guess that's what happens if you take a half-decent idea and actually execute it properly.
Huh. I thought that was so funny.
I didn't know that. Wow. So for those that don't know, we really didn't like I Think My Head is Darkness. I think when discussing visual novels which weren't very good this year, that was one of the first ones which jumped to both of our minds, wasn't it?
I believe so. But it is funny because they did have this character in I Think My Head is Darkness that talked to herself, and then she had this character in her head, which you took the role of, that would respond to her and tell her what to do. And that's pretty much what happens with the mother character in this game.
Wow. I didn't know that at all. Now I have to go back through the production and check all this stuff. Oh man, I did not know that at all. That's really surprising. And it just shows that given resources, anyone can do anything. I'm trying to be positive. I
think My Head is Darkness was a really, really low budget game. Like, it was just photographs and didn't have any sprites or anything, so that is a true statement, I guess.
Yeah. Well, as I said, it's the true definition of it had potential, huh?
Obviously it did.
Yeah, obviously it had loads of potential. Oh man. Well, speaking of a game which has potential, should we move on to our next game?
I believe so. So, the next game that we played was The Sad Story of Emmeline Burns. And The Sad Story of Emmeline Burns is a visual novel that was developed by, and forgive me if I get the pronunciation wrong on this, Ebi-Hime? Ebi-Hime? I don't know how you say that.
I thought it was Ebi-Hime, and I'd already said it that way, but the more you
Ebi-Hime?
say it, the more I think it's actually Ebi-Hime, because Japan
Ebi-Hime?
in it.
That's like the Japanese pronunciation, I suppose. What's I guess it's
Yeah.
supposed to sound like. But either way, it's a game that's developed by Ebi-Hime. And if you've heard of their other game, which was... Oh god, can you refresh my mind on what the other one was called? It came out earlier this year.
Asphyxia.
Asphyxia. You'd probably notice they have a very, very similar art style, and I believe they both use Silly Selly as the artist. So, the sad story of Emmeline Burns is kind of a love story to gothic romances, I would take it. It stars this young girl who has the name of Toma Andrews. Now, the whole story behind Toma Andrews and how the game starts out is she talks about how she's a victim of identity theft. How her mother was going to name her one thing, but then her aunt named her daughter that instead. And it kind of just goes on for a bit about her family and how she feels like her whole life was ruined because of this other girl getting that name. And
if I were called Amelia, I'd be successful magically.
Yeah. I mean, the whole time I could only think about that one Seinfeld episode where like George Costanza wants to name his daughter something, but then his girlfriend's friends steal the name and he makes like a whole fuss about it. So, you know, when the game first starts out and you immediately go to Google Seinfeld instead, you know you're off to a good start. So, I was pretty distracted early on, but then I got back to the game, and when the game finally begins proper, you start off in a cemetery. And I might let Chris take this one part because there's one line that I think you liked in particular. Do you want to say what it was? You probably have it written down.
There were several lines I liked in the first 15 to 20 minutes is her talking to head gremlins. Like, there's no other way of putting it, right? So, Yoko, who's the writer of Sierra Ops, taught me the whole head gremlins thing, that there's a difference between in your head having to sit there and just work something out quickly, right? Like when someone tells you something and you and your head go, shit, who was that? Or, oh yeah, and Tony's coming around. Don't you remember Tony? And you have to go, Tony? Oh, Tony, yeah, so-and-so's cousin or friend or brother or, you know, something like that. When it gets into speaking to your head gremlins is when you just sit there and monologue to yourself for 20 minutes. It's like, what? And after all this, right, you're sort of like skulking around in a cemetery, right? And there's a few, I'd say, precarious lines, for lack of a better word. Now, one of them was just like when you're trying to explain to yourself why you're here in a cemetery, the explanation given is just like some people prefer hot weather or others cold. I like graveyards. What?
Yeah, that was the one.
Yeah, that made absolutely no sense at all. Look, what do you mean just like some people like hot or cold weather? Well, I mean, some of us just like, I don't know, being around the dead, I guess. What? No! That makes no sense at all. There's no...
It pretty much broke you, that line.
Yeah, there's no similarities between hot and cold weather and graveyards. Like, that's not a thing.
One's like a comparison between one extreme or the other, and then the other is just a thing.
Exactly. Like, yeah, oh, well, I like Green Mao and you like Budweiser, but this guy here, he likes wardrobes. Great. Why? We were discussing beer, weren't we? But, it goes on like that. And there's another line as well. They're discussing someone who, and they sort of... You'd never guess this person sort of likes, I don't know, 19th century literature, would you?
Oh, there were so many lines where it's like, oh, and then she looked at me in a way that was like just out of a Jane Austen novel or something like that. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I don't think they mentioned Jane Austen, but, you know, some kind of example like that. And it's just like, it happens so many times. I'm like, oh. Like, I get the point. Like, 18th and 19th century literature. That's great, but can we kind of move on with the game?
Yeah. I really like maths, right? Maths is a thing I am big of. However, my teacher told me when I was 8 to stop including stuff I like pointlessly because you're trying to appeal to a bigger crowd. And if all you're going to do is go, oh, well, yes, he sat down and then he worked out this equation he had preferred. No, that's not good. It's such a heavy emphasis on just, oh, yes, well, he really liked this English literature, enter one of the God knows how many there were at the time here. And, but yeah, there's one line where it was, I don't think she's European enough to pull Poirot off. It's like, hang on a minute. You know all this literature, and now Poirot is European. His catchphrase is literally, I'm not French, I'm Belgian. After reading, I didn't get it. Being a fan of that sort of time of literature and knowing as much about that, and you're like, oh yeah, well, Poirot's European. It's like, he's not. It's the running joke in the series. He's not French, he's Belgian. Oh, grumble. Can I say, before I let you carry on with the story, the art is very nice. There's this like moving clouds effect across the screen. The art's very nice. The art style is really moe. I hate saying that word. It's really, really, really cute. Like, I might die from being a diabetic and get diabetes if I keep watching this. And also, whilst we're on about weird art choices, the main menu, that's really
that
weird.
was really weird to look at. Yes,
there's a chest of drawers. The first one is start. The third one is load, and the fifth one is quit. The second and fourth do nothing. There's then a book that does nothing, and the keys are the preference. It's like, that's not how you do main menus. Like, be honest.
I do appreciate doing like a creative looking main menu screen, but I still think it should be something that you can look at right away and then pick out what everything is. Like, it should be notated quickly without you having to hover over to see what each thing says.
Yeah, exactly. It is not even that. It's just, I think that once you establish that everything you hover over has a thing, it's going to look very weird and seem like, yeah, it's just odd that something you do hover over now can't be hovered over, That's weird. And that's what that was. Every time you move from the book to the key, it's like, I should be able to click on the book, but I can't. It sort of led me to believe, I wonder whether it was a background done before they knew it was going to be a main menu, and then just sort of worked with it.
Who knows? Maybe.
That'd be my guess. But would you like to... Oh, and another thing. Once you meet the girl, we deduce that she's very old-fashioned because she says the word father.
Oh god, yes. We haven't even gotten to that part yet, but sure.
Yeah, what the fuck is that about? I call my mum mother all the time. That's how I genuinely refer to her. Sarcasm aside. Like, not even jokingly, like, oh, hello, mother. Oh, God. It's like we're at an 1800s black and white film, isn't it?
It's just because you're so posh, Tenarium.
Yeah, it's probably that. It's because I'm a tough wanker. But I call my mother. That's not old-fashioned. That's a thing that's done, isn't it? What would I know? I'll let you get on with the story.
Yes, so I won't say too much more about the story, just kind of give you the beginning of it and leave you off if you want to try it yourself. But after you arrive in the graveyard, as Tenarium kind of hinted at, you do meet a girl in the graveyard, and then you note how she's all dressed old-fashioned, and she uses the word father, so she must be old-fashioned as well, and that kind of stuff. Eventually, you find out that she is named, I think she just says Emily at first, and then she leads you over to a grave of an Emmeline Burns. And it's also the grave of Emmeline Burns, the mother and father of Emmeline Burns. So then, after that scene, it plays out a flashback of what happened all this time ago. And I forget what year she was supposed to have died in, but it was sometime in the 19th century. So it flashes back, and you kind of see everything that happens with Emmeline Burns, which involves her and her with the 14-year-old girl, and how they kind of had this secret forbidden romance between each other that they didn't want their families to know about, because that kind of thing wouldn't be accepted for the times. So they kind of had to hide their love. And that's about it. There's some more to the story, but it kind of ends rather quickly.
Is
so
there? Is
well,
there
I mean,
more to the story though?
there's the part about how she dies. That's about it, and then what happens afterwards. But obviously, I don't want to say too much about that because that spoils the rest of it. So if you want to play it on your own, I guess I'll kind of leave that part off. Unless you want to go for like the spoiler mode and just go full out.
I'll talk about it without really spoiling too much of it. So this game, it's vacuous, if you know what I mean.
There's not a whole lot to the relationship.
There's nothing to it. I'm trying to be choiceful with my words. So it's a story. It's basically a 40-minute excuse for having two very young girls kiss one another. That's it. I even retweeted something from the dev because I was like, oh no, I'm just being a twat, right? Maybe there's more to it and I'm just heartless, so I don't get it. And the dev said, I really like writing stories with pretty scenery when nothing in particular happens. That's this game! That's exactly this game. Nothing particularly happens. They just sit around talking and then they kiss a bit.
Yeah, the way the flashback begins, like the whole relationship aspect between these two characters, Emmeline and her girlfriend Cornelia, it's already begun. It's not like you get to see this romance blossoming. It's already begun. You just see some random instance of them kissing and flirting with each other. So it's nothing of significance that happens. Like, you don't get to see the development of a relationship. You don't get to see anything that revolves, her rebelling against her father. You don't get to see how they kind of deal with their relationship in the face of society. It's just them kissing and flirting. I think there's like 2 scenes of that, and that's about it.
Yep, pretty much. Like, that's it. There's not a whole lot more you can say about this game, because when broken down, that's all it is. Like, it's just two, I think, 14-year-olds, isn't it? I think they're supposed to be 14.
That's right.
Yeah, it's just two 14-year-olds kissing. That's all it is. And there's pretty scenery, and nothing much happens. I'm not even being cruel, because that's what the dev said. Like, I can't say anything more about it. That's it in a nutshell. So should we move on to our next lovely game that I've just realised that I've given to myself and I have to try and pronounce?
Yeah, feel free to go on to that then. I will say one thing about that game though was, and it's not much of a compliment or whatever, but I did feel like they started to get their act together with the pacing towards the end. I don't mean like the whole like plot got better, but the writing was much more prompt towards the end of the game than it was in the beginning. Like, the beginning is so flowery and nothing happens for so long, but towards the end, like after the flashback, everything moves along at least a lot quicker than in the beginning. I know it's a small praise, but
bear in mind that after the flashback is like, what, 5 minutes, 10 minutes if you're really slow reader?
Pretty much. I was like, why couldn't the rest of the game be like this? We're not wasting our time with all this, like, oh, and she looked like this out of this, and then I said this to her, and then she gave me a look with her eyes that said XXYZ, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that's about enough of that.
Yeah, so let's go to our next game, which I'm just going to spell it and then try and pronounce it. Zugunruhe. If you've never heard of that first letter, I, of course, meant Z, and you're American. Zugunruhe. Do you know how to pronounce that?
That's my best guess.
See, I was thinking Zugunruhe, but I don't know.
I have no idea. Don't ask me.
Right, so this is one of the... it's a game that Tom really liked from Tyranno Builder. So I was like, oh god, it must be really good then. So I sat down.
And as well as we should clarify, that's Tom from Moa Cube, not Tom from Renpai Tom, right?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, it was Tom from Moa Cube who did Cinders. So I was like, yeah, this must be really good. So yeah, sat down, played it in front of for YouTube. And then The game is really nothing spectacular at all. The art's a bit, but it is a jam, so you can sort of forgive that for the most part. The tone, again, is off because it goes very serious. Because basically, you're reading through your grandfather's journal, who was a Nazi, and no one's told you. Now, he's a Nazi deserter. I think that happens about halfway through the game. Not a spoiler, because it's in the bio of the game, right? So, I'm like, oh yes, my father has never told me that my grandfather or great-grandfather was a Nazi. It's like, how have you never noticed before? Whatever. So he goes flicking through it, but he's also doing it with his mate, and they're sort of like getting angry at one another, and then he's just like, now I need to get on with this diary and just ignore my friend. And then he just like ignores his friend. I was just like, what's the point of the friend being there? You've made it evidently clear that the only reason we're here is to read through the diary. That's the most interesting bit. The other bit is two fucks getting angry at each other looking for stuff. That's not fun.
I didn't understand that at all.
You could just have that as the intro. You know,
I didn't know why you had that. Like, why have that in the game, the whole beginning?
Yeah, exactly. You could just have, what I came across my old grandfather's journal, or I was looking through something, or just anything else. But it kept flicking back to it. I was like, why does it keep flicking back to it? That was the vaguely interesting part. And then the more it goes on, the more I found myself getting slightly bored. I didn't even release the video at the end because the game was meh. It wasn't really bad. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. It's a full-on meh game. Because that's all it is. You're just reading through this diary, but they keep sort of like ejecting you out of it every time it vaguely gets somewhere, and then he gets out and starts a new life in Switzerland with this bird that he got from a piece of barbed wire. I mean, you got further than I did. I quit after about an hour. What happens?
I made it through the whole thing. So yeah, Zugunruhe, the guy deserts the German army or the Nazis or whatever. I'm not really sure, like, if he was a part of, like, if it's supposed to be like the Wehrmacht or if it's supposed to be like he's a part of the, like, the armed SS. It wasn't really clear, like, what part of Nazi Germany he was part of.
I don't think they knew. I don't think.
I wasn't sure. Because at one point they mentioned an SS doctor, but I wasn't sure if he was supposed to be part of the SS or not, because there's kind of a bit of a difference there between the SS being a bit worse than most of the rest of the German army.
Yeah, but, I honestly don't think they knew. But yeah, so well, I just said, right, he gets out of the army, he rescues the bird from the barbed wire, and then he escapes to Switzerland. From there, what happens?
I think he started to work as a doctor, and then at some point, well, I mean, obviously, as the whole nature of the game implies, he gets married to a woman at some point, has children, and that's pretty much it. I think they mentioned down the line that he wrote a book, and this kind of confused me because I wasn't really sure. It's like, oh, he wrote a book that was, you know, a best-selling tale about a Nazi deserter, and he was well-renowned for this. I'm like, if he was well-renowned for this, then why didn't his grandson know of him? I thought it was rather odd.
Was it just a really elaborate way for the father to tell his son that his great-grandfather was a Nazi?
I guess so.
It wasn't actually his diary at all. He just bought one the day before, ripped off the Waterstones, like sticker off. Was like there.
I mean, I didn't really understand. I played this game a while ago too. It was probably like about a month ago, and like with the whole game, like I mentioned before, it's made in Tyranno Builder, and for some reason, it doesn't have any way for you to save. There's no menu, so it wasn't really feasible to go and get back reloaded into the game to like recheck this stuff. I'd have to do the whole thing over again, and it takes so long to progress in this game because you can't click as fast as you can in Ren'Py. So basically what I'm saying is Tyranno Builder isn't very good to play with.
It's because you can't skip until certain transitions are done. It's not like Ren'Py where one mouse click will skip the transition and then the line of text. Like, you have to wait for everything to end and then do it and then do it and then do it. You also can't go back, as Patrick just said, which is annoying as fuck. I imagine you could code it yourself, but why would you want to code it yourself? That sounds like a terrible idea.
From playing this, I think it's a good example of why, if you want to make a game, you should probably just stick to Ren'Py for now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I wasn't really able to go back and check all that stuff. I mean, I think that's what happened from what I read, but I couldn't. I never went back to re-verify that. So yeah, that's pretty much what happened. I will say I thought it was pretty pointless how most of the game you see this. It transitions to the boys in the attic complaining and arguing with each other. The whole game could have been done without it. Really, you could have just told the story from the perspective of the German soldier, and it would have been a stronger story, I think. Especially because, you know, in the end, obviously he survives and has a child who has another child.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of spoilers.
Yeah, that also sort of takes away from it, because you know he's not going to get caught and killed or killed whilst deserting, because it's just like, well, I'm here. You know?
And it's funny. I will say this one too. There's one part where he thinks he's about to commit suicide. The kid's reading the book and he's like, oh my grandfather, he was going to commit suicide. I was so nervous for him, but then I realized that obviously he didn't commit suicide because I'm here. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
He hadn't had kids yet.
Well done. Why don't you just remember that throughout all bits? It's so much easier, you know? Oh, man. I was just hoping for it to do a bit more, and then it didn't. I mean, it's second-person storytelling, basically. Like, it's someone else's story, just through someone else's eyes. But it was not even. It just didn't even go anywhere. Nothing even happened in the end. It's just like, oh yeah, by the way, lol, yeah, he got out and everything was fine. It's just like, so it's just a story of a deserter who led a good life. I mean, that doesn't sound like it would sell too many copies. Imagine if Nelson Mandela's autobiography was that. So, what did you do? Not much. I asked politely if they could just get rid of apartheid, and they said yes. And that was it, really. So, yeah, pretty go buy my book. You know, that wouldn't sell. I'm just slightly disappointed, that's all. I went into that game with high expectations, and it turned out to be just sort of middle of the road-ish, if not slightly below par.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't anything too, like, terrible about the writing. Just, it didn't really go anywhere.
Oh, yeah, you know, there was nothing wrong with the writing, so much as there wasn't anything wrong with the writing in Sad Story of Emmeline Burns either. It was just a story. It's just what they chose to do with their writing that I objected to. Oh, man. So, moving on to our next game, Our Personal Space. And you were telling me before the Skype call, this is one of your favourite games. Not only in visual novels, but of all time.
Well, it's gonna be funny because I actually really did kind of enjoy this one.
Oh wow.
It wasn't that anything about this game was really well done in particular, but I had a lot of fun messing around with these characters and like playing through the different routes that could transpire. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of I guess you could call it like a guilty pleasure. I don't know. But anyway, I guess we should talk about the game itself first.
So hang on, you're saying that, oh well, I enjoy games like The Sims because I can make the characters within it suffer.
Yeah, kind of to an extent. I thought it was kind of like we should probably get to the game itself, and then we'll talk about that aspect, right?
Okay.
About what it actually involves, our personal space.
Yeah.
So, our personal space is a simulator of what it's like to live as a colonist on a alien planet. You're from Earth. You and your husband travel over to some planet that's being colonized, and when you arrive on this planet, it's just you and like 5 or 6 other families. So there's only like a few amount of people on this planet that have to work together. And the whole beginning of the game, you basically choose what kind of relationship you had with your husband. And essentially, like, okay, I met him, and you have a choice as a child. I met him 6 months ago. I've known him for, I don't know, like 3 years or something.
And so you choose these conversations are the most personality bouncing fucking things you will ever see. They are seemingly angry to ecstatic within 3 or 4 words of one another. They're just really angry and then really happy with one another. In the space of, between like 3 or 4 words. It's really impressive.
It's funny because like there'll be this, as you're doing this like beginning, it's kind of like a character generation in a sorts. The husband, who the default name is Jack, is like, oh, Kelly, and that's the name of the character you play as. That's the default. I want to go colonize a foreign planet, and I want you to come with me. And you either have the option of being like, are you serious? Or, yeah, that sounds exciting. Or, there's no way I'm going with you. And it's just funny because you could just completely shoot him down every time, and then he starts getting argumentative with you, and it's, I don't know, I just had fun with that aspect of it.
But not even that, because you don't even have to choose bad options for it to happen. Sometimes he's just pissed at you anyway. And then you're like,
there are times.
I love you. Oh, I love you too. It's just like, what?
There's like a time where he's like, why do you read so much? Just like out of nowhere, and that always happens. Oh,
yeah.
Man. But yeah, you go to this planet to colonize it. You meet a few other families there. You set up like the most basic of settlements. Like you barely have any electricity. You're just like farming off the land. And pretty much after the intro, the rest of the game is, they say you're going to be on this planet for 25 weeks until another ship comes. And you have to survive these 25 weeks. And from there, you get like a choice
25 months, not weeks.
Was it months? Okay, it's months.
Yeah.
Either way, they're...
Which makes it increasingly more absurd, because being the sim, you can pick what you want to do. And sometimes you can just pick to... that's it. You can spend time with your partner, but that will make you more stressed. Or you can choose not to spend time with your partner and relax. Holy shit. If my partner said, I need to relax, honey, I'll be back in a month, I'd be asking, what did I do? What? A month? Are you shitting me? What did I do wrong? Apparently this is just normal. You're allowed to just take month breaks away from the person who you...
Well, it's also funny because you have the choice of, you can either work hard or relax and slack off at work. And you can also do that for like a month at a time then, by that logic as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Whole months at a time, you can just be like, look, I know we came here to colonize it, but fuck it, I can't be arsed. Okay.
But yeah, 25 months, and it's like 25 units, so for 25 times throughout the game, you pick what you want to do. And it's kind of like the same thing in a ways to any other simulator game. You pick this, a scene plays out for whatever you choose to do. And I quite liked that they actually did have unique scenes for pretty much every activity that plays out. Like if you choose to do something like, I want to, because you could either work, well actually there's 3 categories. You work, you research trait, and then you either spend time with your husband or you spend time alone. And so for each of those things you have to choose work hard or relax. You have like 6 or so different traits. I don't remember. It's like intelligence, strength, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And for each of those things, like you spend time with a different person, a different scene plays out. And I liked how they had different scenes for each one. And each character had some unique thing that would happen. So yeah, the game's pretty much about spending time on this planet, working with these colonists and trying to survive and trying to have a stable relationship with your husband and the other colonists as well, which doesn't always work out because there's some interesting things that happen during the course of this game. So, I don't know. Chris, are there any events that take place on the planet that were pretty heavy that you want to mention that kind of get glossed over rather easily?
See, you, I think you've assumed too much here, Patrick. You're supposed to go on and talk about it, and then I was supposed to be like, yeah, I totally remember that happening.
Yeah, so at one point, one of the colonists murders, or well, he doesn't murder, it's implied to be an accident. He kills a young girl. And he hides her body in a river. And so they have a trial for this, and you get on the trial, but you can totally be like, it was an accident. Just, you know, have him do some community service for a few months, and that's it. And that's an option.
Beyond an accident once you start like hiding
when you hide the corpse. Yeah. I think that's going a little bit too far. It was just an accident. He was just frazzled, didn't know what to do, so he hit the dead body.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was something that kind of got glossed over maybe a little too much. Like, well, we're living on this planet and we need every person we can. It's like, yeah, but if someone's killing people and has no problems hiding the body, that might be a bad thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go ahead and exile the guy as well, but I thought it's funny that you could just like pick, yeah, he didn't mean it. Let's just let him off with community service.
Yeah, I get the whole, oh, well, we need everyone, but you don't go hiring people like Michael Barrymore and OJ Simpson. You know, it's just like, yeah, come along. Nothing bad will ever happen with this, you know? Like, those aren't the people you then go and ask along. A lot of this problem, right? Okay, so if I reckon two problems with this game. The art, oh my god, Jesus Christ. Your main character, her hair does something weird, right? She's got like a fringe, and it's like there's like a roll missing there or something in between her fringe. But her hair is so straight and formed weirdly that you'd probably need a couple of kilos of like gel for it to stay in the position it was. Or at least several cans of like hairspray or something like that. There's also like a pose where the character leans. But it's like, what are you leaning on? The text box? There's nothing there. It's, yeah, emotions sort of flip around all over the place. Oh yeah, also perspective is a problem in this game. They can go from normal height to being like 2 feet tall because of the background. The backgrounds are, by the way, photoshopped.
Yeah, they're just photos. They've been
they're just
put a filter over them.
This game, I can benefit from two different things, right? Better backgrounds for a start. I mean, you know, sure, not everyone could afford an artist, blah blah blah. Could benefit from that. It could also benefit if you weren't trying to make the character so John Doe, you know, oh, well, this character is you. If it wasn't that, if it was an actual character that they'd written out in their minds. So that way the tone and emotions wouldn't just so rampantly flip all around the place. If you know what I mean? Like, I think it would be better if it did that, because that way there'd be some sort of focus as opposed to, as I said, it just flipping around all over the place.
If I had to talk about my main complaints about this game is that, yeah, the art wasn't really good, but I didn't really care for that much of it. And like the characters themselves, if we're talking about the main character, I really didn't like mind too much that she was kind of like a blank slate for you to do whatever you wanted. Because I didn't expect this to be a very story-oriented game. So I kind of just went along with that, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to pick these options, and you know, on this route, I can totally like dick around. And for one example, and this is a pretty big part throughout the story, is I was playing as a teacher, and at one point in the game, the mayor said, oh, it looks like you can use some help. I'm like, all right, sure, whatever. And so he brings in this assistant, and it's this guy, I forget what his name was, but he had some kind of Irish name, and he had ginger hair. And it's an option at this game that you could actually cheat on your husband with this guy. And I'm like, oh my god, this is gonna be so much fun. So yeah, immediately I started like flirting with him at work. I was like, oh yes, tell me more about yourself. And at one point I had an option to hug him because he was like one of the only people on the settlement to be a bachelor, of course. So I went to his house for lunch. There's this other part of the game where he like asked for spare parts. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to his house and, you know, give him the spare parts, even though, you know, you're supposed to be rationing them and not giving them away to other people. And so at that point you have the option to like kiss him, and that's what I did, and it led to things happening, and my character ended up pregnant with his baby. So I mean, if you could do that in the game, I'm pretty amused. Even if there's not a lot of depth to it, I still had a lot of fun with that either way.
Definitely, but as you said, I think it's sort of the blank slate problem. I felt like the character would have just been better as opposed to, hey, this is John Doe. Oh yeah, you can name yourselves different things, can't you?
You can even give yourself a pet name.
Yeah, and then you can also give yourselves pet names. So I had Dave and Davette, and the pet names were
Dave Chan.
I think one of them was Fisting Cocksucker. I think that was the guy, but I can't remember what I did for the girl. The girl was much more tame, much more tame. But yeah, it was sort of weird because sometimes they appeared to be arguing whilst using their pet names, and with the names that I gave them, it just sounded so much more aggressive than I feel it ever should have been. But yeah, if the character wasn't just John Doe, say you were Sally Hughes from New Jersey, and you had all this going and you had all that going for you, I feel it would have benefited far better.
That's a valid point. Yeah, I mean, I didn't mind this one. I thought it was pretty fun. And, I mean, it's another one, a game that's free. So I would recommend just messing around with it, because I thought it was pretty interesting, some of the things you could do with it. And there's one point I wanted to make, but I forget what it was now. Oh yeah, the one thing that I did really think this game could have used was more depth to the things that happened in the game. Because it's not really difficult at all. Like, you know, you have the option of, or I should say what the game hinges on, it's like, oh, you have to survive for these 25 months, but it's not really difficult to do. It's not really hard to do that. And I was like, oh, I could have used some more difficulty.
You could, yeah, you'd have to really cock up to fail in that game. You just have to not do anything ever, basically.
Well, it's funny because you know, you work, like, you have your own job. Like, I don't know what Chris picked, but I was a teacher. And whenever you come home, your husband's like, oh, and I want you to work on the farm with me. And I was just like, every single time on one of the routes said it, I was like, nope, I'm not helping out with you at all. He's like, you're so lazy, you don't do anything. I'm like, I work as a teacher.
Yeah.
And I do that all day long. I come home and you immediately want me to work on the farm with you. It's like, fuck off.
Yeah, I was a carpenter.
Nice.
Because carpenters are always the most interesting people. No offense to any carpenters who may or may not be watching, but it's not something you go around telling in pubs, is it? You never brag about being, yeah, I'm a carpenter. You know, that's just never a thing that happens. So, but yeah, I think that sort of leads into a deeper question as well, but we won't go into it because we don't discuss those kind of things on this podcast. This is about having fun, he said.
That it is.
Bleakly. So, moving on, next game is Brilliant Shadows by Ithaqua, something like that, Labs. I need
something
to
like that.
say something before I do it. My review of this game is going to be up on the next episode. The reason for that is because I couldn't get this game to work. There's this unique error that genuinely only I appear to be having, because I've looked in like the Steam discussions for it, I've looked in the forums, nothing. No one is mentioning it. I even mentioned it to the developer. Nope, they don't know. So,
and this error just so happened to not be whenever you started this game Hearthstone and played instead, was it?
Oh man, I wish. But no, I generally put a thing up on it on Twitter that certain things weren't rendering properly. But I now have a working copy of it, but I only got it 2 hours ago. So it wasn't enough to play it in. So my review of this will be done for the next episode. Also, full disclosure, because we're important about these things, and you might not be able to watch after we tell you this because it's pretty damning, but I think we need to come out with it. We have personal ties to the developer, as in a friend of ours knows the developer.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that, so...
Yeah, that's it. That is genuinely it. Like, we don't actually know them at all. Just thought we'd brag about our industry contacts you apparently don't know we have.
Well, I know, I'm assuming it has to refer to the one and only Chief, but yeah, of course he knows them because he knows pretty much everyone.
Whoa. Might not be Chief. Whoa.
Could be one of the other many people we know.
It might be one of the other 2 developers I know. But yeah, would you like to deliver your speech on Brilliant Shadows? Because generally, I couldn't play this game, so I don't know what it's like.
All right, then. So Brilliant Shadows is a visual novel which is on Steam. Like Chris mentioned, it's made by Ithaqua Labs. I guess that's how it's pronounced. And it's about a girl who is graduating from a type of magical school, kind of like, I don't want to say it's kind of like Hogwarts. It's a bit more darker than that in tone. I believe that's what they're going for.
Did you not see the final few Harry Potter films?
Oh yeah, they got so dark, of course. But yeah, regardless of the
dark.
last Harry Potter films, she's some kind of magical user. I think she's called a necromancer in this game. And the magical system is that there's dark magic and there's white magic. But then there's also another type of magic, but I'll get to that in a bit. And so you got paladins and you got necromancers. The main character is named Ash. Her full name's Veronica Ashmar. And she's the roommate of another character whose name is Prudence. And Ash and Prudence are very close. They're best friends. Ash is a necromancer, Prudence is a paladin. And once you graduate from the magical school, they have you participate in something called a pairing ceremony. And during this pairing ceremony, necromancers and paladins get paired to each other based on who's supposed to be the most compatible with you. So they go to the ceremony, they do the ritual, and they're supposed to get marks on their wrists that depict what they're going to be tied to. So they get like a spider, or they can get a phoenix or something else, and they have to find the other person with the matching mark, and that's going to be their partner. So the whole beginning of the game, Ash and Prince are talking to each other about how they're so excited, they're definitely going to be paired to each other. They go to the pairing ceremony, and of course, as you guess it, they're not paired to one another. Prudence ends up paired to this other guy named Hector, who's kind of a creepy guy who's been left back a few years because he was supposed to graduate 3 years ago, but he never got paired to anyone else for the last few ceremonies. And then Ash is looking for her partner, but there is none present because it turns out there's no one else with her mark, the mark of the Phoenix. So this leads to a bit of like a controversy because usually if you're not paired to anyone, you just don't get a mark, but she has a mark. So they try to figure out what's going on. They do some research. From this point on, Ash, Prudence, and Hector are all pretty much working together to kind of solve this dilemma. And they go to like the elders of the school, the two headmasters who are named Belinda and... No, not Belinda, that's another character. Luciana and Zakaria are the two headmasters, and they're paired together. So during the course of the game, you find out that, of course, Ash, not only being the best friend of Prudence, but also was romantically... had romantic feelings for her, which unfortunately Prudence doesn't reciprocate, and now that she's paired with Hector, she's pretty much in love with him. This kind of goes on for a bit with the three of them having this drama between each other with like the whole romance triangle, and then the three of them also trying to work together to solve the problem with Ash being paired to someone who they don't know of. And it goes on for a bit, during the course of this, you learn about gray magic, which is these magicians who are able to steal the organs out of their paired counterpart. And by stealing the organs out of them, they become twice as powerful. And they're like kind of these like dark magicians who are like banned from civilized areas or whatever. And that, like that's their fear, that Ash is paired with one of these people, and that he's going to be coming for her. So the game's actually pretty long. I'd probably say it's somewhere between 4 and 5 hours or so. And during the course of the game, it's mostly about these three interacting. Eventually, they get 2 more companions along their way, Belinda and Elfnod, I think they call him. And eventually, events happen, which I don't know if I should cover too much about, because then it kind of gets all spoiled. But I guess saying this much isn't too much. Eventually, they're forced to leave the school because Hector tries to figure out what's going on, so he makes an unofficial pairing ceremony, which pairs the two, Belinda and Elfnod, together. And then when the headmasters find out, they kick them out, and they're forced to go their own way, and they kind of travel around and try to find some safe haven. And there's more that happens in this game, of course. I probably described about 3/5 of it, but I won't go too much further. I will say, though, that this is part 1 of an episodic series, so, you know, things aren't fully resolved by the end of it, and we're left with a cliffhanger at the end as to what's going to happen. The game itself, I thought, It was pretty good. I liked the story of it, how pretty much from the get-go they have this premise with the paladins and the necromancers, and then they have this whole thing with the gray magicians they throw in, and there's even more that happens later on, but I won't get into all the magical characters and species in this world. The one problem that I really had with it was that the pacing was off at times. And by that I mean, yeah, you had this stuff happening where you had the pairing ceremony, and then, oh, we have to quickly find out what happened to Ash. But then a lot of it kind of gets sidelined because there's romantic drama. And I'm all for having romance in games, obviously. I thought, Cupid was very well done, and that had a lot of romantic element to it, even though the game itself wasn't romantic. There were romances involved and drama between some of the characters, but I felt everything Cupid was paced out. In this game, there are kind of some long breaks where the characters are arguing with one another because Ash has feelings for Prudence, but Prudence isn't a lesbian. She's actually attracted to Hector, but Ash is blaming Hector for it all, and they get into arguments and they fight and blah, blah, blah. It goes back and forth a few times throughout the game, and I'm like, okay, we kind of need to move this along. And then there's more scenes where Ash kind of just pities herself because she has no one, and she's like, why can't I meet any nice girls? And I'm like, I don't really want to hear this character whining for herself because she can't meet anyone. It's like, your life is in danger and you're being pursued by dark necromancers and you're worried about hookups. It's like, come on now. We need to move along the story. So that was my biggest complaint, was that the pacing at times got off and it got too slowed down by personal drama between the characters. Yeah, Chris obviously didn't play much of that, so I don't think you really got to see any of it.
I got 15 seconds in before it stopped working. Before, just like you had to hit ignore like 20 times to hit what, to see one line properly, because it would try and render it like every line you went through. So I do stress this is from what I can tell, a completely unique problem. This is one of these problems that can only happen to me.
And it did.
And it managed to, yeah. Apparently, I seemingly installed it wrong on Steam twice, which is really impressive when you think about it. Like, considering all you have to do on Steam is install and then download and then hit play. Apparently managed to do that wrong. But yeah, would you recommend this game overall? How much is it?
I'll double check real quick. Let me see. Brilliant Shadows. It's on Steam.
$7.
$7. Yeah, that's not bad. Or is it on sale right now? Let me just double check. No, it's $7 total. So, yeah, it's $7. That's not bad. I'd pick it up. I do like the story. I like the premise. I like the lore that this world has with the necromancers and the paladins, and then there's these like dark people who able to harvest the organs out of their like paired thing, which is kind of dark. And then there's more stuff that happens later. I mean, it almost runs the risk of having too much stuff thrown at you at once, but they do pace it out throughout the game like rather well. Like, they introduce first the concept of the paladins and necromancers, and later on they get to like the gray mages, I think they call them. And then further on they introduce another type, which I thought, I mean, it's almost too much, but it's actually paced out the game rather well. But the pacing of like the stuff like the drama, I felt kind of slowed down the games at times, because you kind of want to see what's happening here, what's going to happen with Ash and her companions. But then, hold on a second, we're going to have a 30-minute argument about how we feel about one another and how Ash doesn't trust Hector no matter what, and this and that, and oh, you cannot be paired together. It kind of gets a bit annoying. But aside from that, I liked it. If they tightened up the pacing in like the following chapters of the game, it would be much appreciated. But I am curious to see what's going to happen next. I am interested in the characters. I guess one last thing to note about the game is there was voice acting. But as per how we usually feel, I think you could probably just turn it off and enjoy the game just as much.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. If you like just listening to someone else read it for you, and then you skip through having it read to you, it might be really good. We're just not into that. So unless it's incredible, I just turn it off.
And I didn't like the voice actor for, or I should say the voice actress for Prudence. And she's like one of the main characters. And I didn't think it was particularly high quality. I guess is the word for it. And then there was another one that was really bad towards the end. I forgot who it was because it was a minor character, but I was like, wow, like they use that. They just do one take. But fortunately, it was a minor character who was only in like 2 scenes, but still. Voice acting is definitely a bit of a hit or miss thing, and usually with visual novels, there's a lot of misses.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, see, but you would recommend it overall?
Overall, I recommend it. It can be a bit, like I said, with the relationships, it can be a little bit bad with the pacing, but I do like the concept they introduced in this game, and I am interested in seeing what happens next in the story.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely be checking that game out now. It sounds fun now that I supposedly have it working. And then you'll have my review in 3 weeks, which is coincidentally our award show.
Oh my.
3 weeks from now. So yeah, we're gonna have all of the awards thrown right at you. Not thrown at you, like we don't actually have awards. It will be it won't. Yeah, there won't be a tangible thing. I won't be able to lob them at people. No one will be able to feel them. They're just
Metaphorically
there.
speaking.
Metaphorically, exactly. So we're going to go and prepare for that. So, any last thoughts on this podcast, Patrick?
Well, other than I'm pretty sure we might have found one of our favorite games of the year, which makes me very happy. No. This is like the last one where we review a bunch of new releases for 2015, and I have to say, at least we ended with a high note.
We did. A very high note at that. So, thank you everyone for coming along who listened live, and everyone who's watching the episode on YouTube who's gotten here as well. I was thinking about maybe putting these on SoundCloud if I could be bothered. So that might be a thing I consider doing. But it's more of a if I can be bothered. Do let us know if you want that though. But until then, we'll see you in 3 weeks.
That's right. Until then.
Until then, bye everyone.
Have fun.
Bye. Bye. I'm waving my hand. You can't see me, but I am. I promise. It's rather lazy, and I've got a pen in my hand, but I am.